The nominee to lead US Central Command in charge of Afghanistan operations has revealed to the Senate that Afghan army losses are unsustainable. Lieutenant General Kenneth Mackenzie's admission comes even though the US has been training its army for 17 years now.
Their losses have been very high. They're fighting hard, but their losses are not going to be sustainable unless we correct this problem.
There are currently more than 13,000 US military personnel in the country. That's around 6 times less than the estimated number of Taliban fighters. More than 2,000 US soldiers and 13,000 Taliban fighters have already been killed in the war. And in the last 4 years alone, almost 30,000 Afghan troops have lost their lives. The US has now spent over $1 billion on the war, reaching a peak at the start of the decade. During Mackenzie's confirmation hearing, lawmakers lashed out at the lack of progress despite all the money thrown at the conflict.
We've been at it for 17 years. 17 years is a long time. What are we doing differently when it comes to the Afghan security forces that we haven't done for 17 years while being focused on this?
Let's cross live now to political analyst Mushtaq Rahim. Mushtaq, thanks for joining us here on the programme. Those figures, Mushtaq, are astounding, aren't they, really, that we just heard there? You know, the huge number of losses. The idea was to train and assist the troops, the Afghan troops, but actually the losses that they've had, it's obvious that they can't control the Taliban in the country. Will Kabul's call for direct dialogue with the Taliban finally bring peace to Afghanistan?
Well, basically, when we talk about losses, it has, since 2014, the war has intensified in Afghanistan for a few reasons. First and foremost, we had a surge of international forces to up to 130,000 in 2010, which was drawn down in 2014, and the international forces phased out and they transited the responsibility of combat and security maintenance to Afghan forces. So significant decrease in number of forces fighting was one reason. In addition to that, of course, the international forces took the responsibility of training the Afghan forces only. So that was the reason that caused increase in the human losses. In the meantime, when we talk about the peace process, yes, the Afghan government has been trying to lure the Taliban into the peace talks. In 2010, the HPC was established, and for the first time, the Afghan government formally called upon the opposition groups to join the peace process. The Afghan government presented or practiced their political will by signing the peace agreement, of course, with a much smaller group of Hizb Islami in 2016. And then there have been calls on Taliban time and again. On 28th of February, during the Kabul conference, the Afghan president offered a comprehensive peace roadmap to the Taliban. And again in Geneva, he presented his program for the peace. So there have been efforts to really reach a political settlement with the Taliban.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the US nominee to head Central Command admitting that Afghan troops have unsustainable losses, and you've just gone through the timeline there, but you know there was an awful lot of media attention about the withdrawal of those troops, that they'd done their job in training and assisting, and that the Afghan troops were able to cope with the country and the Taliban. So, you know, do you expect Washington to now change its approach to this war? Because we heard at the time that it was a success, but it's obviously been a failure, hasn't it?
Well, basically, the end result or the way out from the current situation, which is absolutely a stalemate between all the fighting, among all of the fighting sides, particularly between the Afghan forces and the Taliban, the way out is finding a political solution to the problem, reaching a peace agreement with the Taliban and between the Afghan government and the Taliban, and then deciding on the way forward in terms of international withdrawal from Afghanistan and working towards stability. And in this regard, I I think countries of the region have to play a significant role. Unfortunately, these countries have not been coming forward in terms of supporting the Afghan government. But now is the time that they have to provide support. And these countries include Russia, China, Iran, and most particularly Pakistan, that they have to support the Afghan peace process. Otherwise, an unstable Afghanistan is in interest of no one in the region. I can tell you that the way insurgency has been upgraded by the insurgents across the globe, we all know that the spillover effect of the Afghan insurgency can really challenge the security of any country in the region.
Okay,
so now is the
Mushtaq.
time that there has to be real effort made.
Sorry, we're going to have to end it there. We've run out of time. Political analyst Mushtaq Rahim, thank you very much for talking to us here on the programme.